All right, let's do this. Ready to dive deep into some really fascinating stuff.
Nice.
You know how you get hooked on all those creatures mentioned in the Bible?
Right.
Especially the ones that God didn't directly create.
No.
Well, we're going deep on that today.
Oh.
We've got these excerpts from, it's almost like this shadow bestiary.
I love that. A shadow bestiary. It really kind of captures the whole vibe of what we're looking into.
Yeah, it's like peering into this hidden world.
Yeah.
Running parallel to the one that we know, right?
Totally.
So, okay, let's kick things off with a big one. The Nephilim.
Okay.
You find them in Genesis.
Uh-huh.
And the text actually lays out a few theories about their origins.
Yeah. You've got those sons of God
Right.
taking human women as wives. It's Genesis 6.1 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And their kids, they're the Nephilim. And so one theory is that these sons of God were fallen angels.
Okay.
Another one is they were like these powerful human rulers.
Mm.
Maybe even like tyrants, you know? And then there's this idea that they were descendants of Seth, you know, Adam and Eve's third son,
Yeah.
who like married into Cain's line.
Okay, so you've got those three theories.
Right.
And something about that fallen angel theory, it really grabs you.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like a cosmic horror story
Yeah.
playing out in those early days.
I mean, it's a really strong image for sure. And it was pretty common back then when these texts were first being written to interpret it that way. Imagine those ancient readers, right? Just trying to make sense of a world where angels could actually walk around and maybe even, you know, have kids with humans.
It's crazy. I mean, it makes you wonder what they'd think about us today and our fascination with, like, alien encounters or genetic manipulation.
Sure.
Maybe we're all just expressing the same core human curiosity, but in different ways.
I think so, yeah.
About the unknown, the limits of our existence, right?
Yeah.
But getting back to the Nephilim, what makes that fallen angel theory so compelling?
Well, I think if you look at the theology, the idea of these fallen angels trying to mess with humanity's lineage, it really adds another layer, doesn't it? Remember, the Messiah, right, as foretold in Genesis 3.15, had to come from a human bloodline.
Right.
So if these sons of God were really fallen angels, think about it. Their actions could have been a strategic move to try to stop God's plan by messing up the very line the Messiah would come from.
Yeah, that's a really intriguing point. It kind of raises the stakes a bit. It's not just about these giants walking around. It was this cosmic battle between good and evil playing out on like a genetic level.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is like even more supported by how they describe the Nephilim, like mighty men or giants, right?
Right.
Those words suggest these beings, they have incredible power, incredible stature, and you could see that as coming from their mixed heritage, you know, the angel and the human.
Right, of course. I mean, a lot of people today, they're going to be skeptical about the supernatural explanation. Yeah. They might want to go with something more rational, historical.
Yeah.
But there's still something powerful, isn't there, about that image?
Yeah.
Of these fallen angels messing with human lineage.
Yeah.
It taps into those deep fears about the unknown, right? And how fragile our existence actually is.
Absolutely. I mean, even if we don't take it literally, the whole Nephilim story, it can be like this powerful metaphor for the consequences of the choices we make, right?
Right.
And the dangers of messing around with things we don't really understand. It's like sometimes the stuff that seems most unbelievable, it actually holds these deep truths about being human.
Okay, so we've got these mysterious Nephilim, potentially born from, you know, humans and fallen angels.
Yeah.
What other creatures are in this this shadow bestiary? What else does it reveal?
Well, let's talk about the ultimate fallen angel,
Okay.
Lucifer himself. His story is, it's grand and tragic all at once. A stark reminder about what pride and ambition can do to you.
Right, so this is where things get really interesting. We go from these hybrid beings, right, to a full-blown angelic rebellion. The text paints Lucifer as this radiant being, this high-ranking angel, maybe even leading worship in heaven.
Wow.
And then he falls.
The text really emphasizes how huge that fall was.
Yeah.
Imagine, right, being in charge of music and praise in heaven, surrounded by God's presence, and then choosing to rebel. It really speaks to how powerful free will is. Even the most exalted beings can make terrible choices.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what could possibly drive an angel to rebel against God? Like, what could be so tempting to lead to such a dramatic fall from grace?
The text says straight up that pride is the root cause.
Pride.
Yeah. Ezekiel 28.17 puts it like this. Your heart became proud because of your beauty. It's a classic theme. but it means something totally different when you're talking about an angel. Human pride is one thing, but angelic pride, that's a whole other beast.
What's the difference then between human pride and angelic pride? I mean, they both seem pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
But is there something about angels that makes their pride more dangerous?
That's a good question. I think the difference is in how they exist.
Okay.
Angels, unlike us, they were created perfect.
Right.
And they were right there with God.
Yeah.
Their pride didn't come from being insecure or needing validation like we do. It came from their perfection, their closeness to God. And that kind of pride, when it turns into rebellion, that's really potent.
So it's almost like their pride blinded them to the real source of their power and beauty. They thought it was something they achieved, not something inherent.
Exactly.
And then they think they're somehow equal to God.
And that's where the 5 I will statements come in.
Okay, the I wills.
Right. The text uses them to show how ambitious Lucifer was and his desire to take over. Like, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. It's all rebellion, every statement.
Right. So it's like he's trying to build his own kingdom, his version of heaven with his rules. But what's so interesting is how the text puts Lucifer's fall next to Jesus's exaltation. It's like this cosmic play about good and bad, with pride on one side, humility on the other.
Right. That contrast is key.
Yeah.
In Philippians 2, we see Jesus, who was God, right?
Right.
Humbling himself, becoming obedient, even to death on a cross.
Yeah.
Because he was humble, God raised him up. It's a good reminder. Real greatness doesn't come from power or showing off. It comes from surrendering to something bigger than you.
So we've got the Nephilim, potentially born from this forbidden mix of angels and humans. And then you have Lucifer, the fallen angel, whose pride caused his rebellion. Both stories really make us think about the limits of power and what happens when ambition goes unchecked.
And they make us think about free will, right? The balance between good and evil. Questions that are still relevant today.
Okay, we've covered these creatures of rebellion. But what about creatures of deception? This text goes into another fascinating figure. The serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Ah, yes. The serpent.
Right.
So mysterious, so symbolic. It might seem less impressive than a fallen angel or a giant, but the impact it had on us, maybe even bigger.
And the setting is so important. The text describes this perfect paradise, the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve lived totally innocent.
Yeah.
It's this powerful image, a world untouched by sin and suffering, and then the serpent shows up.
Yeah, like a disruption of that perfect harmony.
Right.
Remember, this garden wasn't just any old park. It was sacred, a place where people connected with God, the serpent being there. It violates that sacredness. It's a transgression that sets everything in motion, changing the course of human history forever.
The text says the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. And it can talk.
Right.
It's not just a random animal. It can think, deceive, manipulate.
That talking serpent is such a powerful image. In religious history, some people take it literally. Others say it's a symbol of temptation, or even Satan himself. But whatever you think it is, the fact that it can talk, that it can actually have a conversation with Eve, that's crucial. It lets the serpent plant those seeds of doubt to twist what God said and to really appeal to what Eve wants deep down.
And the text highlights how those desires are multifaceted. The serpent appeals to the physical desire. Good for food.
Right.
Then there's the visual attraction, pleasant to the eyes, and the desire for knowledge, desirables for gaining wisdom.
Yeah.
It's like a three-pronged attack on her senses and her intellect.
It's like a master class in temptation, you know?
Yeah.
The serpent doesn't use force. It uses persuasion. It plays on Eve's curiosity, her desire for knowledge, and her longing for something more. It's a strategy that never gets old.
Right. And it's still incredibly effective. And the consequences are devastating. Shame, guilt, spiritual death, separation from God. It's like this domino effect of suffering.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do we fall for things that seem good at first, but end up having bad consequences?
Right.
The serpent's deception is like the blueprint for all temptation, a warning about desire and how evil hides itself as something appealing.
And so the serpent leads humanity away from Eden and into this world of pain, suffering, and separation from God.
But it's not the end of the story.
Okay.
The text hints at a future redemption, a little glimmer of hope in all the darkness.
Right.
It's a prophecy that will have a huge impact on both humanity and the serpent.
And that's where we'll pick up next time. We'll explore the serpent's fate, this prophecy of redemption, and how its deception still affects us today. So last time we were talking about the serpent in the garden, right?
Right.
And how its deception led to humanity's fall from grace.
Mm-hmm.
But the text doesn't just stop there, in the darkness. It offers this glimmer of hope with this prophecy about the serpent's offspring and the woman's offspring.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Even while God's cursing the serpent to crawl around, eat dust and all that, there's this hint of some future conflict, like a cosmic battle, that'll lead to victory over evil.
It's like this little seed of hope planted right in the middle of the wreckage.
Exactly.
But the language is so cryptic.
Yeah.
What does it even mean, this whole enmity between the serpent's offspring and the woman's offspring?
It's definitely open to interpretation. Theologians and scholars, they've been debating it forever.
Right.
But one common way to understand it is it foreshadows Jesus, who will eventually defeat sin and death.
So the woman's offspring would be Jesus, and the serpent's offspring would be evil, like evil in general.
That's one way to see it. The serpent's offspring could be all those things that go against God, right?
Well,
all the temptations and lies that try to lead us astray. And Jesus, as the woman's offspring, he's the one who comes to break their power.
But isn't it a bit of a stretch? Connecting this to Jesus directly. This was written way before Jesus was even born.
Right.
Couldn't it have other meanings, other interpretations?
Of course. Absolutely. It's important to remember interpreting the Bible is complex. There are often layers of meaning, right?
Okay.
Some scholars see it as a more general statement about the constant struggle between good and evil.
Okay, so not necessarily just about Jesus.
Yeah, more like a big picture kind of thing.
That makes sense. It's like offering us this framework, right, to understand temptation and redemption without getting into all the specifics.
Exactly. That's why it's so powerful. Each generation can read this prophecy and find meaning that fits their time and context.
So even if we don't see it as just about Jesus, it's still hopeful. It suggests that even when there's evil and deception, we can still overcome. We can find redemption. We can fix the broken world. It's a reminder that the story doesn't end there, that the fight against evil keeps going.
Yeah.
And that we all have a part to play in it.
Exactly. And that brings us back to these creatures born of sin. We've talked about the Nephilim,
Right.
Possibly from fallen angels and humans, right? And we've looked at Lucifer, the angel who fell prey to pride and ambition. And now we've got the serpent, the master of deception, who tricked humanity into disobeying.
What's interesting to me is they all represent a twisting of God's creation. In a way, they're like dark reflections of what should be good and holy, reminders of the potential for darkness and evil, even in the most beautiful parts of creation.
That's a really insightful way to put it.
Yeah.
They're like warnings, telling us what happens when we leave God's path, when we give in to temptation.
But they also show us the power of choice.
Oh, absolutely.
Lucifer and Eve, they had free will, right?
All right.
And they chose to disobey it. They turned away from God.
Yeah.
And embraced something that led to their downfall.
That's important. These creatures aren't just puppets. They're not controlled by fate. They make decisions knowing the consequences. We have that same power to choose, to shape our own destiny, to go towards the light or give in to the darkness.
So what can we actually learn from these creatures born of sin? What lessons can we apply to our own lives, do you think?
Well, I think one of the biggest lessons is about pride.
Pride, okay.
Both Lucifer and Eve, they wanted to be more than they were. They wanted to be like God.
Oh.
And that's what brought them down.
It's like a warning then about letting our ego get too big, thinking we're above the rules, above being humble, above submitting to something greater than ourselves.
Exactly. And I also think it teaches us about being discerning. That serpent was a master at deception. It knew how to twist things, to play on Eve's desires, to make bad things look good. We have to be careful. We have to look at our own motives, our own beliefs, to make sure we're not being tricked by false promises or led down the wrong path.
It's like we need to develop our own internal BS detector to help us figure out what's real and what's not. Especially in a world with so much information coming at us all the time.
That's right. And it's not just about the information out there. We have to be aware of our own biases too, right? Our own ideas about things and how they might be affecting how we see the world.
It's like that saying, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are.
Exactly. Our experiences, our beliefs, our fears and desires, they all change how we see things.
So we've got these creatures born of sin showing us these human struggles. But the text also keeps talking about redemption.
Right. A way back to the light.
It's like even in this shadow bestiary, there's still hope.
That's what makes these stories so powerful, right? They're not just about falling, about darkness, about the bad stuff that comes from sin. They're also about changing, about healing, about making things whole again.
And it's not just about us being redeemed individually.
Right.
The text hints at this cosmic redemption, like fixing all of creation back to how it was supposed to be.
Yeah. It's a promise that even though things are messed up, even though we've gone so far from what's right, we can still find our way back. We can heal the past. We can build a future where love and justice win.
That's a powerful vision. And I think we really need it in times like these, when there's so much uncertainty and division.
I agree. These old stories with their ideas about temptation, falling, and being redeemed, they can give us guidance and inspiration as we try to figure out our own lives and make a better world for everyone.
It's like they're giving us a map, not with specific directions, but with these universal truths about what it means to be human.
And they tell us we're not alone in our struggles. These stories have touched people for ages all over the world because they connect with something deep inside of us.
Well, we've come full circle, I think.
Yeah, haven't we?
We started with these creatures born of sin, and now we're talking about redemption for us and for the whole world.
It's a journey worth taking, isn't it? From darkness to light, from being broken to being whole, from despair to hope.
It really is. And on that note, I think that's where we'll leave off for today.
Okay.
But the conversation doesn't have to stop here. Keep exploring these ideas, keep asking questions, keep looking for the light, even in the dark places.
That's great advice. And don't forget, the most important journey is the one we take inside ourselves.
Until next time, keep diving deep. You know, it's really hit me as we've been talking about these creatures. They're not just these far-off figures,
Right.
like out in some myth. The text makes it clear. Their stories show us these inner struggles, temptations we all deal with.
It's like they knew back then the scariest monsters are the ones we carry inside. The potential for darkness is not just out there, it's part of us.
And it's not just personal struggles either. This shadow bestiary idea. It almost feels like it's saying something about the dark side of human systems, like institutions.
Oh, that's interesting. Think about the Nephilim, right?
Yeah.
They came from this idea of powerful beings exploiting others. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like how power gets abused in our societies.
It totally does. It's like these old stories are still relevant.
Yeah.
Because they show us these patterns of human behavior. We may not have literal giants anymore, but we've definitely seen what happens when power and greed go unchecked.
Right. And the serpent story, all that deception and manipulation, how often do we see that playing out today?
Oh, all the time.
Propaganda, misinformation, people twisting the truth to get what they want.
It's everywhere. And it's not always some evil mastermind either. Sometimes it's us just wanting to believe something, even if it's not true.
Which goes back to what we were saying about being discerning.
Right.
We have to think critically, question what we're seeing and hearing, be aware of our own biases.
So how do we actually do that? It's easy to say be critical, but with so much information coming at us, it can be overwhelming.
It's tough, yeah. But one thing is, pay attention to where the information is coming from.
Okay, the source.
Right. Who's presenting it? What's their goal?
Mm-hmm.
Are they trying to inform you, persuade you, or just manipulate you?
We need to be like information detectives, always looking for clues to see if what we're seeing and hearing is actually credible.
Exactly. And it's not just external stuff either. We have to be aware of our own biases too, right?
Yeah, like our preconceived notions.
How those shape how we understand things.
It's like they say, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are.
Right. Our experiences, our beliefs, our fears, they all color how we see the world.
So we've got these creatures born of sin, reflecting these human struggles.
Yeah.
But throughout the text, there's this other theme, redemption, a way back to the light. Even in this shadow bestiary, there's a glimmer of hope.
That's what makes these stories so timeless, right? They're not just about falling, about darkness, about the bad things. They're also about the possibility of changing, healing, making things right again.
And it's not just about individuals being redeemed.
Right.
The text talks about this cosmic redemption too, like restoring all creation back to how it was supposed to be.
It's like this promise that even though the world is broken, even though we've messed up, there's still a chance to find our way back, to heal what's been hurt, to create a future where love and justice win.
It's a pretty powerful vision, and one that I think we really need right now.
Yeah.
In these times of uncertainty and division.
I agree. these old stories, with their themes of temptation, falling, and being redeemed. They can really guide us and inspire us as we try to understand our own lives and build a better world for us and for those who come after.
It's like they're giving us a map, not with turn-by-turn directions, but with these universal truths about what it means to be human.
And they remind us that we're not going through these struggles alone. These stories have spoken to people for centuries all over the world because they connect to something deep inside us.
Well, I think we've come full circle.
We have, haven't we?
We started by talking about these creatures born of sin.
Right.
And now we're talking about redemption for us and for the whole world.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It really is.
From darkness to light, from brokenness to wholeness, from despair to hope.
So on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dives.
Okay.
But this conversation, it doesn't have to end here. Keep thinking about these ideas. Keep asking questions. Keep looking for the light even in those dark places.
That's a great way to put it. Remember, the most important journey is the one we take within ourselves.
Until next time, keep diving deep.